T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're back for our third and final episode. How's the zoo today, Bri?
It's better when you have power, so that definitely didn't happen.
That's gotta be like brutal for the inside animals, I feel like.
We have backup generators and everything. Just makes the zoo a lot more noisy.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
How's summer break for you going?
Fantastic. I'm actually going see my parents tomorrow down in Connecticut, so I'll get to see them. So I got the yard all set, nice and mowed, feeling successful like a nice little happy homeowner. So, good times had by all.
I can't wait to be able to buy a home in like 30 years.
Yeah, it's a great time. You're never busy with house stuff. Projects,
yeah.
Once they're over, they're over. There's never more.
Okay, let's get to Scott Fishbowl.
All right. So, with that, we're on our third and final show. So talking about wide receivers here. So I think it's something that we've alluded to pretty consistently the past two nights, talking about quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers, is everyone has gotten a really nice score, boost, but not all scoring is made the same, and not all boosts are made the same. And with the increase in scoring for running backs and tight ends, with the point per carry stuff, and then all the tight end extra boosts, wide receivers are a bit nerfed this year. And it's not as though that they're not going to score well, but it's more about the comparativeness of what they're scoring to their counterparts. So, when you can look down and see the Scott Fishbowl points, the previous two episodes, that difference column is something that I really like to at least highlight real quickly, because you could see, quarterbacks were getting like an extra 100 points versus SFB13, and same with the running backs and the tight ends. And for the wide receivers, obviously they do get a boost, but again, it's just not to the same level as we see with those other positions. And even in those points per game, last night talking about especially the tight ends, a lot of those tight ends were in this range, which is in the range of a lot of the wide receiver 2 type guys. And that just again goes to show you the increase in the potential of a strong running back, a strong tight end build kind of gives you with these wide receivers. But it's very important to remember, you have to start 3 wide receivers. You have to start 3 wide receivers. Don't be the person that goes into a draft and doesn't know that you have to start 3 and thinking that it's only 2. That would be super embarrassing to be that person. I can't
imagine being that person.
Listen. Could you? Not me. That's for sure. Definitely not me.
Definitely not. Yeah, definitely didn't happen 2 years ago to you.
No, 3 years ago, my first one. But who's keeping track of things like that? So it is really important to also not only pay attention to the scoring, but also the roster settings. Who knew?
While you have those points per game up, I just want to point out, just to underscore the tight end thing. So you see Chris Godwin there at 18.7, Jalen Waddle 18.7, Mike Evans 18.2. Pat Freiermuth was at 18.7. So yeah, Pat Freiermuth outscored Chris Godwin, Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper last season.
And that's why we harp so much on the importance of yesterday's show of like, you need to know running backs, you need to know wide receivers. Oops, sorry, a little difficulty there. So scrolling down, this is where I let Brian kind of take the wheel here and talk about really what, again, that looks like in all of this. So looking at these charts, again, tight ends to wide receivers, get a little bit more into the comparison piece of these two positions and how this really all breaks down.
Yeah, so this is top 500 weekly tight end scores, rounded to the nearest whole number. So any top 500 that scored at least 8. And then that's top 1,000 wide receiver weekly scores that scored at least 8. So I think it's like 512 tight ends and 1,013 wide receivers. But I think looking at it by weekly scores is a great way to get an understanding of the scoring, because points per game really doesn't give you that. So what are players actually scoring? And of those top 1,000 wide receiver scores, over 200 of them are scoring less than 14 points a game. So there's the floor is low for them. That's the very worrisome thing, is that there's going to be wide receivers that are not scoring points for you. Versus tight ends, we talked about that plateau last night. The plateau pretty much extends till 20 points. You look at that, 150 tight ends scored between 14 and 20 points in a single game last year. That's insane when you compare that to what the wide receivers are scoring. And those tight ends, just how tight ends are drafted, went significantly later. So the floor is just higher on tight ends. And that's, like you said, it's not that wide receivers are necessarily nerfed. It's that everything else is boosted up higher.
Yeah. And then in kind of to get that same kind of look in there, looking at the wide receivers and running backs, it's kind of the same story there, right?
Yeah, just look at how steep that is with wide receivers. It's the floor is just lower with running backs, and this is top 1,000 weekly scores for running backs. So we know who's going to be starting the third wide receiver on teams. And so we know those guys, they're going to be on the field more than those lower level running backs are. So it's funny to see running backs have that higher or score more points. And so, yeah, there are still a lot of guys scoring a lot of points for wide receiver. But if you can see the highest score is not nearly what the highest score for wide receiver is not nearly close to what the highest score for running backs is. So the ceiling is higher for running backs. The ceiling's higher for tight ends. The floor is higher for tight ends. The floor is higher for running backs. You got to be careful with wide receivers. You do not want to be loading up on just those low end wide receivers.
Yeah, and this is something that, we talked a little bit about yesterday too, with, with the increase, especially in running backs and what we see with running backs, does this really lend itself to a robust RB model? Because you could just, stack up and then just take whatever wide receivers you normally could do in a normal draft. And the more that we've looked at these numbers and the more that, I kind of listen to Brian and go through all this stuff, it makes me a little hesitant to fully get into that build versus a hero RB model or a true zero RB, just because, again, once you get out of that really top end elite wide receiver range, it gets a lot thinner, again, compared to other positions where, like, yeah, you might have your wide receiver 3 scoring 10, 11, 12 points a game. And you're like, okay, that's fine. That's normal. But that comparative running back or comparative tight end is just going to outscore them every single week. And that's where the problem arises.
And I think the other thing is that if a wide receiver gets pushed from being the wide receiver 3 to the wide receiver 2, or even the wide receiver 1 in an offense, that upside for that is not nearly the upside of a running back getting pushed to being the starting running back. The usage is not the scoring. It, like we've mentioned it before, it rewards players that are playing and rewards guys who play well. It's not just trying to game the system. So that's why I think the zero RB makes sense, is that you can get a lot more upside on a running back than you can on a wide receiver.
Yeah. And that's kind of, everything we see with our draft theories there. The biggest thing, at least, for me, it's always right. You always want to draft quality players. Like, that's not, world-renowned analysis. But I think now more than ever, the quality and the high-end guys that you get is far more important than just stacking, like, oh, I'm going to draft 10 wide receivers and stream whoever's is best, because that's going to be a very dangerous game. Especially if you kick the can on wide receivers and you start looking at wide receivers, your number 2 guy is around 8 or 9 wide receiver. That's going to start to get pretty dangerous with your builds, right? With the spread of scores, like, it is pretty normal, right? From year to year to year, like, the wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 12 is 5 points per game, or then 12 to 24 is 3 points per game, or, whatever it is, or around those numbers. That's all fine and normal. But again, the other positions is what really makes a big difference here. And then, Brian, I know you included that chart there. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, if you want to scroll up just so you can see, because I think that's a nice area to show like how the cliff falls off.
Mm-hmm.
That this is wide receiver 3 scoring, and I think it looks really similar to the tight end 1 we saw last night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tight end 2s. So wide receiver 3 is after that. I think you and I both agree that there's kind of this dead zone of,
yep.
Do you want to throw the dart on someone who's not going to be getting a whole lot of points for you? I think you need to start be thinking, like, looking to see what wide receivers are going, and check to see if you have those 3 starting wide receivers that you feel comfortable in, or at least have a few late round targets. You're like, okay, I only have 2 right now. There's a guy in round that is going around 12 that I think I can get in round 11. That is going to be my wide receiver 3, because I think that third wide receiver spot is going to be brutal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think because there's just a limited number of targets that can go around across the league, and with how scoring is, like, you do not want to be trying to figure out every week who that wide receiver 3 is.
Yeah, it's going to be more important than ever to make sure that that third starting guy is someone that is some at least more reliable than not. And again, that's always going to be the case, but with the other scoring this year, it definitely rings true.
And then also, I can just look at that chart I have there real quick, and just the first thing I think is just in awe of how good of a job Scott Fish did with his scoring, and like how equal that is. That's the top 500 tight ends versus the top 1,000 wide receivers and the top 1,000 running back weekly scores. They're all like the same.
Yep.
The big difference there is like so I have Q1 and Q3. Q1 is 25% of data is below that. Q3 is 25% of data is above that. So when you look at the Q3 for running backs, 25% of scores is above 23 points. The ceiling is massive for them. Versus wide receiver.
Ceiling is the roof.
Yeah, the ceiling is the roof. Wide receiver, it's more than 2 points lower than that, which in this large of a data set, that is very significant. Yeah. And so that really worries me that the wide receiver, the rest of this data looks very similar, except for that wide receiver ceiling is just significantly lower. And yeah, the Q1 for running back is lower too. I think that has to do with there's just less running backs. So you're not going to get, there's more wide receivers out there that are usable than there are running backs. So I think that's why the Q1 is lower. But the Q3 is what you should be paying attention there too. And that's why we joked, like you joked last night, like the tight end is now the tight end 2 is everyone's wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Because I think this proves it, that the numbers are so similar that tight ends should be being drafted a lot higher and with these wide receivers and running backs.
Yep, and that's something that we will look at here in a little bit too, and looking at some of the current live drafts and some recent done mocks, and see where guys going and where do we agree and disagree. But before we get to that, I want to talk about some players that we like. Not really looking at any, super early guys like Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, duh.
Love Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, you don't want him. But looking at some guys that are maybe in the middle, like 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds, and then deeper into the teens, DeAndre Hopkins still leads the list for me. He is a guy that, obviously barring health, but whether it's New England, Tennessee, wherever he goes, he's going to command a ton of targets. And right now his ADP is very obviously lower than what it normally would be because no one knows the outcome. And frankly, I understand that those two offenses don't excite people. I get it. Trust me, I'm a Patriots fan. I get not feeling super excited about that offense. But whether it's Mac Jones or Tannehill throwing him the ball, if he's going to be seeing 100+ targets, you're getting that guy probably 2 to 3 rounds later than you normally would.
I think it's also like last night we were talking about the running backs that don't have a spot yet. There's a discount on them.
Yep.
So I'll happily take that discount. I agree with you there.
Yep. I think we both mentioned Brandon Cooks in our
Yeah.
in our little chats here. What makes you say Brandon Cooks?
He's in a good offense, and I mean Brandon Cooks is just reliable. I mean the guy has been the definition of stability.
Yep.
Even though he can't stop changing teams. So
honestly, it really is. Like, I know this has nothing to do with Scott Fishbowl, but his career is insane.
It's weird.
Everywhere he goes, he's like, I'm just going to put up 1,000, then I'll switch teams and do it again.
Yeah, and he's being drafted way too late. So he's one of those guys that if you're like, oh crap, my wide receiver 3 is non-existent, he's someone like, okay, lock that in.
Yeah, I feel very good with him as my wide receiver 3. Juju is someone that Brian gave me some guff for because as a Patriots fan. But for me, it's very simple. I think he's tends to be going around like 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there, if I'm remembering correctly. I think the offense is just going to be better purely because of the OC change, and they're going to throw a little bit more. Jacoby Myers last year had 96 targets, and I think it was like in 14 games. I think Juju is, as long as he plays 15, 16 games, which obviously not guaranteed, he should be another guy that's going to be right around that 100 target mark. And again,
I agree with you. I'm going to show my hand to my Zaxby's division. Hopefully no one's watching. But I plan to have all my wide receivers by the time Juju's being drafted. So
yeah, which I also very much understand, and I might be the same way. I haven't really fully decided yet, but he's someone.
You're right. No one else has that 100 target upside where he's being drafted. So
yeah. And that's kind of how I look at it. Elijah Moore is someone that I'm very excited about the Cleveland offense. As long as obviously Watson comes back to form. I know we both love Chubb. What's up? But Cooper is always up and down, but he'll get his. But I think Elijah Moore is going to step in, and the camp reports are always very positive, but I think there's something there. 2 names, actually, that's the third looking at that late round there, the Kansas City offense. What was that? Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and then MVS is going super late. I know Matt Harmon had a really interesting video on him. I think it was June 30th. I was just watching it about his reception perception and how Kansas City put him legitimately all over the field, in the slot, out wide, off the line, in the backfield. They played him everywhere. And I get, especially the dynasty take of it is like wide receivers that don't show up year one, like it's a bad track record. But at the end of the day, when you're a wide receiver tied to Patrick Mahomes, there's going to be a lot of interest there. It's the same with Kadarius Toney, but he never seems to be able to stay on the field. And then MVS is not super exciting, but again, a guy that is tied to Mahomes. Out of those 3, do you like any of them, or especially Sky Moore versus Toney? Do you have any leans?
As someone who bet MVS is over every week last week and lost last year and lost like every week, I've lost all hope in MVS.
That's fair.
He's a field stretcher, and he's great. He's someone that's better for actual football than he is for fantasy football.
He seems like the perfect best ball type guy.
I'm not even sure that.
Not perfect, but
Sky Moore, I think I'd rather have Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney in best ball and
that's fair.
Scott Fishbowl. I have to go with Toney. It kills me to take a Gator, but
yeah,
he's shown flashes of being like, he's just twitchy. Like the dude is just, when he's on the field, he's like the Tasmanian devil, just like can't be touched. Some of if he's healthy. And I think the one thing is with Scott Fishbowl, you want points. If he's going to just be able to score 5 or just be able to go do 5 weeks for you because he can't stay healthy, I'm going to play him those 5 weeks because he has massive upside. But I'm not sure about Sky Moore. I think you are correct with the dynasty people have figured out this year one thing that if they're not productive, it's not a whole lot. And Kadarius Toney, he was injured, but he had like 4 games where he just went insane.
Yeah, so that's kind of the rub is where you're taking either one of those guys and like you're either banking on Sky Moore taking a massive year 2 jump, which is not obviously something that you can bank on, or you're taking Kadarius Toney, who has awesome upside, but literally is always hurt. So
you made me think of one more guy that I have been drafting in all of my mock drafts, and that's Gabriel Davis. What are we doing with him? What? So he was
what is it called? Like the post hype buy or whatever?
Yeah, he was a top 5 round pick last year.
Yeah.
And he wasn't great, but he was
fine.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And he's still tied to one of the top quarterbacks in the league. He has that boom potential. And if there's all this drama, Stephon Diggs and stuff, like, I don't know why he's so late. I don't get it.
Fully believe it's because the hype on him was so crazy last year. And then there was a few of us that were like, I'd maybe pump the brakes on this a little bit, that people got so over their skis with Gabriel Davis that now that it's like warranted to be drafted higher than what he is, people don't want to because they got burned last year.
Like, am I forgetting someone they added? I know Dalton Kincaid, but I'm not worried about Dalton Kincaid.
Nope.
Is there anyone else they added that? I mean, are they afraid that James Cook is going to be used more in the passing game? Like, the difference between last season and this season is too much. So
yeah,
I'm getting a lot of Gabe Davis.
Maybe I don't think there's really no buzz on Khalil Shakir. I think Dalton Kincaid, I think, is what people. I think it's a mix of people not feeling him after everyone on him last year, and then Kincaid. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he's someone that definitely can go up there. Quick question there. Any rookies to target as late wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3? I don't know how late this would be considered, but I love Jordan Addison. Love. I know Brian does not feel the same way, but for me, he's walking into the number 2 role in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson is going to see a crazy amount of defensive looks, and he's still going to eat, but I think the field is going to be so open for Addison. I love Jordan Addison, and if I'm wrong, I'll go down with that ship. But
I'm the Quentin Johnson guy.
Yep.
You and I both disagree with who our rookie to the target is. I just see Quentin Johnson as being able to just tear that team apart, or he's going to be the final piece in that offense. And I think he's with. I said Herbert. I think is one of the top 6 passers in the league. I mean, he is just it. I think it's the final piece that they've been looking for, because who was it? Did we say Josh Palmer had like over 100 receptions last year because of injuries and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you give Quentin Johnson what Josh Palmer saw last year, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think that really just depends is Keenan breaking down again, or can Mike Williams stay healthy? But that's where I'm a little bit lower on QJ, is purely because I think that if Williams and Keenan are there, he's clearly the number 3 option versus Addison, where I think he walks into number 2. And I know they have TJ Hawkinson as well, but
yeah, he walks into number 3 too. He's the number 3 target there.
Yeah, fair. A little bit lower. Mechie, Woods, Nico Collins. I know the Houston offense. I think that's why I like Dalton Schultz actually so much, is because those are their 3 wide receivers. They're all going pretty late in the late teens or mid to late teens. Any flyers you like out of those 3, or are you just completely avoiding?
I'm avoiding John Mechie just because I know it's not his fault, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but he did miss his first season. So this is pretty much his rookie season in NFL. Yep. And I'd rather have Robert Woods is like, he's almost like Brandon Cooks light, where like anywhere he goes, he just puts up numbers. It has just been a dependable target. I also think I've heard a few reports of Nico Collins looking good, and I'd probably go Robert Woods. But then again, this is where if I'm looking at, like, I need a wide receiver and I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, what went wrong with my draft? This is where I want to be hammering running backs, tight ends, and maybe thinking about a kicker. Yeah,
we're for sake of time and everything, I guess to talk about kickers real quick, We're not doing a show on kickers like we did last year. Shout out to Linda Lyons on Twitter. She does tremendous kicker work. So if you have any kicker questions, go ask her. That's the person to go to. I will say with kickers, they do get a nice boost because their extra points are worth 3.3 versus just the 1. So kickers are definitely the most viable they've been out of the last like 2 years for Scott Fishbowl. So I think last year we kind of decided like you can still take a kicker late and it does not matter. I'd be a little bit more prone to taking a kicker in the late teens just because of the points that they can score. But that's our kicker talk. Go see Linda. She has it on lock.
Chase good offenses. Don't try and tell me that the Houston kicker is a good value because you want a team that's going to be in position to score points. That's it.
Yeah, literally just pick whoever you think is going to score the most points and go get them.
And if you're struggling, just go to your favorite sports book, look at the odds for how many games a team's going to win, and just go down that and just be like, oh, the guy for the team that's 12.5 wins over. Yeah, I'm going to go to 11.5. Just choose good teams.
Yeah. And very much not Scott Fishbowl oriented, but that's also how for fantasy baseball, when I'm streaming pitchers, I'll just go look at the over-unders and be like, all right, this has a really high one. Okay. And it's like, even just like very lame stuff like that, Brian, you hate it. I get it.
We went from kickers to baseball.
I don't care. Just looking at like just simple betting stuff like that can be a nice, quick, easy hack is the point, Brian. Back to Scott Fishbowl. Carolina. I think DJ Chark is like a screaming value.
I think they both are. I think Thielen and DJ Chark are both great values.
I like Thielen too. I don't know. He might be a little bit banged up and old and slow at this point, but he seems like a great route runner that Bryce Young will just pepper. But I think Chark is like a screaming value where he's being taken in the teens. So I really like Chark. And then frankly, we've been pretty pro Los Angeles Rams for literally every single position. Van Jefferson is just buried there. It is pretty after Cup. It's Van Jefferson and Ben Skowronek. So you have to watch our Monday shows. That's the best we do with Skowronek. But like there really is, there's a lot of targets to be had in that offense after Cup, a lot. But like
and Higbee.
Yeah. So someone's going to catch it. So I think someone either targeting a Van Jefferson very late or I don't even know if Ben is getting drafted. Like either one of those guys, I like them real late as well.
Yeah, you're making me be excited about drafting another Gator, and I hate it.
I mean, listen. Hook 'em horns. Yeah, is there any other names that you like in wide receivers?
Like I said, I have not examined this part of the draft much because I'm hoping to be done with wide receivers. I think at this point, it's worth looking at like some deep rookies that we don't really know a whole lot about. So I don't even know that far in wide receivers.
There you go. There's the Rams again.
Yeah, there you go. I think some of these guys, like I think we named all the guys that I at least think are worth throwing a dart at.
Yeah. And I think, frankly, not having like a ton of names off the top of our heads is also just another point of like really by this part of that late draft, like taking some flyers and darts on some of these guys is great, but this is where you really want to be hammering running backs, tight ends, and because they're the ones that provide, frankly, very similar ceilings and much higher floors. So you want to probably prioritize early wide receiver and then just hammer away on those other positions. So I guess to that point, we can start looking at some zoom outs and looking at some team builds and some mocks and what we like and what we don't like. So the first one here, we'll just kind of scroll down. I'm in for you guys. So we have one mock here. It's 15 rounds. I can go a little bit bigger there for you as well. So this one was done, I don't know, about last week or so. And what you can start to see with it is, the valuing of QBs is a little different than what we've seen from at least the two live drafts that kicked off last night. But what do you think, talking about especially like flattening of QBs and QB values, team 110 there that started with Justin Jefferson. Now, I do know the person that did this. They specifically went into this mock thinking like, I'm going to completely punt on quarterback and see what I can get. But Jefferson, Bijan, Barkley, Pitts, Goddard, McLaurin, Swift, I don't hate it. Now, their QB2 is Trey Lance or Baker. So that's obviously something that you don't want to fall into.
That's terrible. They should have taken Garoppolo in the 10th. Or Purdy in the 11th. All right. Yeah. Or Riddler in the 11th. Someone who you know. Take Mac Jones in the 11th.
Mm-hmm. But I think that it is interesting where I don't, maybe going with, let's see, in the 4th round, there was no one really there. But, Love as your quarterback too, I think is a really nice value. If you want to punt on quarterback, I would still take one in that first 3 rounds, definitely. Really first 2, if it makes sense to where your draft position is. But if you want to punt on quarterback, I'd punt on your quarterback too. Where you get, look in that 6th round, Russ, Carr, Stafford. I don't know if I'm feeling Bryce Young that early, but like Jordan Love, like those are the guys like as my quarterback too, that if you're going to punt on position, those are the guys that I would go target.
Yeah.
And then some of the early ones, like the double stack, Allen, Tua, and then no tight ends, or Fields, Prescott, and then again, kind of punting. But I know you're a big Dulcich guy. So what do you think about stacking some of these two quarterbacks, bang, bang, and then trying to build out from there?
As we saw with wide receiver and running back, like the ceiling, especially with wide receiver, like you want the guys who can hit that ceiling. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wanting to make sure I get at least one wide receiver 1 in the first 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah.
So you can see like Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, and Amon-Ra St. Brown all went in the 3rd and 4th round, and T. Higgins too.
Mm-hmm.
If it gets to that point, I don't have at least one. I think those guys are the bottom level of the wide receiver ones. I want one of those guys, and then that's so. I think the 101 there is going to be in trouble having Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, and Jahan Dotson as their those are their top 3 kind of starters. They have a bunch of guys who are kind of like mid guys that could break out. Jahan Dotson could easily break out. Mm-hmm. We talked about Juju.
Yeah. Bateman's an unknown.
Bateman also, he is the one. They did a really good job of drafting upside. Mm-hmm. And I could easily eat my words. I just don't like that. I think you're losing a lot of points on wide receiver that I'm not sure that you're adequately gaining back in other positions.
And then I know, so I mean, I'll make this a little personal here, but like I'm drafting out of the 107. In a lot of the mocks, Burrow, Herbert, Fields, sometimes Lamar Jackson is within those ranges out of, I think the top 3 quarterbacks are the top 3 of Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. That next group there, do you have a lean between Herbert, Burrow, Lamar? Like, are they all pretty much the same to you, or do you think one is like clearly like you want to prioritize, 1, 2, 3 in that type of order?
I think Burrow and Herbert, I might go over Lamar.
Ooh.
Just the passing upside, like especially Burrow and Herbert, like they just have the passing weapons. And I know Lamar is going to get his on the ground. I know he's going to do that. But I mean, Burrow has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Mm-hmm. Herbert has Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Eckler. Did he officially resign?
Yeah, I think he's in.
Or not resign, but he's in. And Lamar has Rashad Bateman, maybe. Odell Beckham Jr.
Odell.
He does have Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I'm gonna go with the guy because we talked a lot about how I think in regular scoring I go Lamar because the rushing
Yep.
upside matters.
Yep.
Here, rushing upside does not matter. So
Yeah, it's not as important as the passing. And then I think, someone like if we want to look at, so this one, Waller went in the fourth, Hawkinson went in the fourth. I think in the two live drafts, neither of those were even remote. Like Hawkinson went, I think 2-1, right, in one of the
yeah,
live drafts. So looking at the tight end position there with Waller, Hawkinson, Pitts, Goddard, Kittle, Freiermuth. Do you think those guys especially are being underdrafted to where
in
they
this draft,
probably should?
yeah,
Yeah.
in the live drafts, I think they were pretty accurate. I think it's been a recent thing that people are realizing how valuable tight ends are. Because
Mhm.
someone in one of the drafts at the 12, they did Andrews and Hawkinson, I think.
Yeah, and we'll actually here we can jump to that one right now. You see these guys, they are going a little bit earlier. Kelsey 1-1, Andrews, Hawkinson, Pitts in the third, Kittle, Waller, Goddard. Yeah, they definitely have moved up, and I think more people are starting to pay attention to, right, what we're seeing out of the tight end possibilities there. Do you have any? I feel like Waller is kind of like the big tight end sleeper, if you will, of like he's got an outside chance as to be close to Kelsey. Are there any? I know we talked about tight ends and stuff last night and stuff too. Any guys you think creeping up that probably should be getting taken even higher?
We mentioned them last night. I think the more I think about it, like I am very bullish on the Cleveland Browns offense.
Mm-hmm.
I really like David Njoku.
Yeah.
I think he is going to be a top 6 tight end. Just if that offense is what I hope it will be, which
Yep.
I think Watson gets back, and I think he is going to be someone. He is creeping up draft boards, and so I hate it. But if he's there in the 8th, I'm probably going to take him. And this he
Mhm.
lasted to 7-3.
Yeah, and then the other live, he made it to 9-10.
Yeah, no, if if he's there at 9-3, dude, I'm getting that.
Yeah. Also, I'm
So,
taking looking at this draft, I'm taking Cole Kmet over Dalton Kincaid.
oh yeah, Dalton
every
Kincaid
single
should
time.
not have gone ahead of Njoku
Yeah, for
or
sure.
Dulcich or Dulcich. Dulcich should not have gone that late if Kincaid went that early.
Yep.
Sorry to who drafted him. We're not trying to make it personal, but that's just a terrible pick.
And then back to the other live draft. Sorry to jump around on you guys, but same thing. Kincaid went 10-9 before Kmet, and then Higbee as well. As someone again, I would take Higbee over Kincaid as well. It's just right when looking at the potential upside. I don't think Kincaid offers the same level of production as these guys that are just more established in the league.
Also, something that team perfectly points out. So full meta pelvis points out is look at his wide receivers. So just a reminder, you need to start 3. So he's pretty much committing right now to his flexes being a tight end and a running back.
Yep.
And his tight end 3 is now going to be someone that we like. Some of the guys that we like are gone. So you see in that 11th round, Elijah Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Brandon Cooks, Darius Toney. It's getting thin quick. And that's the position where you were in 3 years ago. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to draft a lot of wide receivers right now.
Yep.
And I think that's the dead zone we were hinting at.
Yep.
So I would not want to get to the 11th and not have my 3rd wide receiver if that list of guys we have right there is gone.
Yep. And I love the Higbee pick. I just, looking at, I probably would have taken Higbee at 10-9 and then at 11-4 taken Moore or Cooks or someone like that instead.
Or Juju, yeah. Any of those wide receivers that literally are there in the 11th round, I would have taken over Dalton Kincaid.
Yep. And I think it's not that Kincaid can't be good. It's just more of, again, looking at the entire team build and looking at it that way. See any other big mocks, looking real late. This was a mock done, I think, a day or two ago. So looking real deep into these, the later teen rounds. I kind of like the idea of, looking at the 102 here, Isaiah Likely going into 18th. He was someone that like last year was just like, people were like saying like he was already a tight end 1. Like it was pure insanity. But there's a very real possibility that like Likely competes with the other wide receivers as like a very valuable pass catcher in that offense. So I really love the value of Likely that late.
Look at 22-7. Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ignore that. Love that pick. I feel like I should talk about. I feel like Gesicki's gotten a little bit of burn of like, hey, he's like a nice, tight end late. As a Patriots fan, I would love to believe it. I'm really torn on Gesicki versus Hunter Henry. On how they're going to be using the offense. I'm not really sure. That late, I don't think it matters. I think you just like take them and hope for the upside. But frankly, Gesicki at 15, Henry went 21-1. I mean, I think that's great value potentially for both, because like Gesicki is going to be likely. I mean, he's a slot wide receiver, to be honest. But then you have some other guys where Meyer, Laporta. I really shy away from rookie tight ends, especially in the draft.
It's really funny that Isaiah Likely and Trey McBride are going after Dalton Kincaid, Laporta, and Mayer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing as the Gabriel Davis thing. It's like there was so much hype on those two last season.
Yeah.
And honestly, Trey McBride, he did pretty well without Zach Ertz.
My feeling is I'm pretty much fading the entire Arizona Cardinal team, but
just it's rookies in similar situations, and it's just I think the fantasy community still needs to correct harder that rookie tight ends are not it.
And someone we didn't talk about, not to make it just a tight end show again, but Taysom Hill was, I think, tight end 5 last year in Scott Fishbowl. Unreal value, and he's going very late in every draft.
I hate Taysom Hill so much.
I know you
billboards. Do. I see him on billboards everywhere. Okay, you don't have to see his face when you're driving on the interstate. I do.
He's a very handsome man, Brian. Kicker,
his smug aura mocks me.
Listen, if he was a Seminole, you'd be his biggest fan.
Maybe.
But that's, I feel like, looking at around, my biggest thing is one, as much research as you can do and looking at mocks and being in mocks, they're never going to be fully accurate, but at least gives you a little bit of an idea. And especially if you're drafting on sleeper, like the ADP is the ADP. So if you're looking at someone like, oh my God, I think Taysom Hill is getting woefully underdrafted and he should be a 12th round pick, you can have that in your mind and use that to your advantage, of the sense of everyone is going to be using the sleeper draft board. And like, you can just scroll down a little bit, maybe like he's too low. He's being way underdrafted, and you can use that to your advantage. So I think the biggest advice that I would have is in like how to use a mock draft isn't specifically like, oh, I know I can wait to round 16 to get Taysom Hill. Once it gets really past round 12, 13, just like take the guy you want. Like you don't always have to play the waiting game for value. Go get your guy, especially when you think that he's going to massively outperform that ADP. If you're that bullish on a player, don't just wait and then get sniped on him because you decided to wait because you're like, oh, well, I know he's way down on the sleeper list, so no one is going to see him. Go get, you don't want to crazy overdraft, but, Taysom Hill in 16 or just taking him in 13, 14, like, who cares? Who cares? Go do it.
The one person that this mock draft helped me realize that I need to draft is Mike White there in the 22nd round.
Mike White. Tua.
He's the backup for Tua.
Yeah.
Skylar Thompson's not good. I'm sorry. He looked terrible last season. Mike White looks great. And with those weapons, that's where I'm using that pick. Like,
Yeah, and we talked about that too, kind of handcuffing your quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew, a Mike White, Jacoby Brissett. Like Brissett might legit start 8 games this year.
No. I think it's smart to sack or to handcuff other people's premium to other premium quarterback picks because it sounds really mean, but you just ruined someone's Scott Fit. If Joe Burrow goes down and the person has no one to replace Joe Burrow, that person can kiss goodbye to the playoffs.
Yeah, especially with the amount of points that's going to be scored this year.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to survive. Like last year I had Russell Wilson and I still was able to make a very deep run into the playoffs because I was able to build a good enough supporting cast where it didn't really matter. But this year I think that's a lot harder if you don't have that second quarterback. But I think that's it. I think we've covered everything we want to cover. Get your 2 quarterbacks, load up on running backs, tight ends, but do not forget about the wide receivers early.
Know the scoring, know the format. If you don't, you are going to have a bad draft. And we want this to be fun, so you want to have a good team.
Yep. But with all that, thanks again to Scott Fish for putting this together, for putting together a very fun scoring system, but more importantly, Fantasy Cares and doing everything, in those regards. So if you can donate to Fantasy Cares or get your Scott Fish Bowl merch, or, go rather than, if you don't donate to Fantasy Cares, go donate to a local organization or just do something good. I think at the end of the day,
your local zoo.
Your local zoo, right? Your local school system, right? Whatever it may be. I think the biggest thing is, whether it's donating to Fantasy Cares or donating to another good organization, it's all about, kind of giving back to the community and helping people out. So with whatever you can do with that, if it's not money, maybe it's time, whatever it may be, give back to your community and be a light of good for the world. I think that's really the overarching goal in everything that Scott Fish is trying to put together, and as the community really rallies around it. So always keep that in mind. Be a good person, do good things. So
and draft Logan Thomas in the 16th round.
There you go. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you use these to your advantage and win your division, and hopefully meet both of us in the playoffs. Hopefully don't beat us in the playoffs, but maybe you do. I mean, good for you. But no matter what, thanks for tuning in.
If you've watched it this far, please add us, both me and Dan, when you draft Logan Thomas.
Yes.
Please.
We'll all be LT fans for life. All right, everybody. Adios.
Adios.
Peace.